Welcome to the graveyard. I'm Violet Hummingbird, and today is day 10 of Spooky October, where every evening I am reading you a true ghost story. And I'm also reading them for the first time with you. I just skimmed the stories to see which one would be good. But please subscribe and hit the bell if you don't want to miss another evening of storytelling. And today's story is by, let me find it, Michael. My tale begins, as so many often do, with childhood memories of a strange old house in the country. I was very young when my family moved from the relatively large city of London, Ontario, a few hours northeast, to a sleepy village in the country. The term village itself is even generous, for the hamlet of Churchill in the mid-70s consisted largely of rural crossroads clustered with a general store, a church, and a few odd houses. Only the fact that it lay upon a well-traveled highway saved it from complete anonymity. The house itself was old even then. Its weathered red bricks had already seen close to 100 winters. Character emanated from its every beam and window, indicating a colorful history. The building stood on the southeast corner of the busy rural crossroads, enjoying a commanding view of the surrounding countryside in all directions. With the full third-story attic and pointed gables, the house stood tall, and yet its flaking eaves were nonetheless dwarfed by two massive willow trees that flanked the northern boundary of the property, a tentacled buffer between house and road. Their cascading branches swept out over the lawn to the edge of the road. Farther along in line, there were remnants of a third mighty tree in the decaying girth of a broad stump that jutted only a foot or so above the unkempt tangle of grass and weeds. The house was quite large, much larger than our needs, but the price and location were to my parents' liking. We had been told that previous to the recent spate of short-term tenants, the home had once belonged to the only doctor in the area. Decades before, when there were no medical facility within safe distances, the doctor's home had doubled as a local hospital. Many of the rooms in the house had therefore served some sort of medical purpose during the doctor's many years in residence. The interior was both spacious and strange, owing both to its era of construction and its former purpose. High ceilings and hardwood floors meant that the sound echoed well through the house, including every creak and groan of its aging timbers. A large room at the back of the home was actually a converted gymnasium, complete with basketball nets and court lines on the floor. I still recall the ominous rumble of my tricycle grinding relentless circles on the wooden surface. The sense of space in the house was creepy, foreboding. As a child, I never wanted to be caught more than one room away from another living soul. Occasionally, play would get the better of me and I would lose track, suddenly realizing that I had strayed too far, only to rush frantically through the void of empty rooms until I found somebody. By far, the creepiest place in the house was the old cellar, a dark, cold, dirt basement. We seldom ventured down there as it was too damp and musty to store anything of value within. The cellar had been useful, however, in the past, as evidenced by the chains and manacles that hung upon two of the rough stone walls. Apparently, in the doctor's day, the state of medicine was such that certain mental disorders were not well understood. Patients were deemed temporarily insane, even as a result of what we would now characterize as a seizure, would be taken to the cellar and chained to the wall. Here they could be restrained to exhaust their illness without physical harm to themselves or others. Few were the times I had the nerve to go to the basement, even in the company of others, and to this day I shudder to think of the primitive care that may have transpired in days gone by in the dark, damp earth below our house. But I have spoken only of my days in the old house. Though its walls and halls were eerie by day, they became quite disturbing by night. Strange things would happen in the night, and I can only be thankful that at my tender age at the time protected me from a full realization of events. Near the top of the stairs to the second floor, there was a half door on the wall, which led to the stairs above the attic. Every night when we went to bed, one of my patients would check the bolt on the half door to ensure that it was fully. One of my parents would check the bolt on the half door to ensure that it was fully closed. Despite this precaution, every single morning we awoke to find the half door ajar. Not only was this door unbolted, but standing slightly open, with a chilly breeze wafting down from the attic and out into the staircase. Short of eventually nailing the door shut, this continued to occur on a daily basis. As strange as this may seem on its own, there were other oddities at night. Lying awake in my bed, there were times that I could swear I heard those chains in the basement rattling and metallic clinking echoing through the silence of the house. Moreover, I was not alone in hearing chains, for my sister, 2 years older than I, also vividly remembers this eerie rattling of chains. The links reverberating as if thrashing violently by angry captives seeking to break their shackles and win their freedom from the damp cellar. It is likely that more than one mentally ill patient imprisoned below found freedom from the chains through death. My sister is alone in one memory she retains of the house. The room that she inherited had apparently been the former nursery in the time of the doctor. It was here the newborn babies were cared for, and likely in those days it was here that a few of those babies may have died. The doctor would have been, by necessity, a specialist of all branches of medicine, and yet during a difficult childbirth could likely do no more for a sickly newborn than a midwife. My sister always swore back then that she could hear babies crying in her room, and that they would not let her sleep with their constant wailing. None of the rest of us ever heard a sound. But the most eerie occurrence in the house happened one time only. The four of us were torn from slumber by the sounds of a horrific crash. The noise was deafening, sounding like it was happening just outside or near the house. A symphony of shattering glass, squealing tires, shrieking metal, and the screams of the dying. In our own rooms, we each ran to our windows to look out onto the road. There was nothing. The whole family hurried downstairs and huddled onto the porch in the stillness of the night. My father actually got into the car and drove up and down the four directions of the crossroads, so certain that he'd heard a terrible accident that happened and that people needed help. The roads were quiet, not a soul out traveling this late at night. Eventually, we all went back to bed, to what few hours of fitful rest remained. If all four of us had not heard the same thing independently in our own rooms, it might have not seemed so real. The next morning, my father was across the corner at the general store talking to the owner. He was an elderly gentleman and had spent most of his life in the area. After some hesitation, my father described our experience from the night before. The old man was silent for a minute, then explained that there had been a horrible car accident many years ago when the doctor still lived and practiced in the house. On that exact date, a car full of people were coming home from a party late at night. Nobody knows how heavily the driver had been drinking, but they lost control of the vehicle as it approached the crossroads. The car swerved off the road and onto the doctor's lawn, slamming full force into the third willow tree in line. Awakened by the crash, the doctor had run out and administered what help he could, but in vain. All four of the passengers had died on his lawn, the spot marked still by the rotting stump of the willow tree. The tree had been cut down following the tragedy. The doctor had passed away years later. For our part, we did not live in the house very long, not quite a full year. The house still stands today, a red brick sentinel of the crossroads, though all else around it has grown up. Many more houses now crowd along the busy roads, flanked by trees, both old and new. There's a new owner at the general store, and I see a new family living in my old house as I sit across the road in my car. The new owners of the house also have children, a little older than I was when I lived there almost 30 years ago. They're playing outside, driving trucks, and serving tea on the natural tabletop afforded by the old stump on the corner of the lawn. So please let me know in the comments below what you thought of this night's story, and I would love to see you tomorrow night for another story, and I hope that you're having a happy spooky October. Also, if you have a true spooky story of your own, feel free to email it to me if you want me to perhaps share it at heytherehummingbird@runbox.com. I'll also put my email in the description below. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you tomorrow night.